Hello, and welcome to the Jaunty Mantis, a tabletop role playing game podcast where we answer creative questions for curious gamers. I'm one of your hosts, Jesse, and with me, as always, is my co host, Maddie.
How's it going?
Pretty well. Thank you for asking. We are in a bonus episode right now, and so we had a question from our list of bonus episode questions to discuss. So I'm just going to throw it at you, Maddie.
Yeah.
Should you read the game's fiction?
Should you read the game's fiction? What do you mean by that?
Like, well, that's what I don't know. I think you came up with this question, and I'm just asking it back at you.
Oh, okay. Well, we got a mystery question that we're not sure where it came from because either I was the one that came up with it and don't remember it, or Jesse is trolling me. So when it comes to games fiction,
yes, I want to define this because I had thoughts as I was thinking over this topic.
Okay, so what are your thoughts?
I think fiction, for this discussion, I'd be happy with including, like, having some distinctions, but including like anything that is basically non-mechanics about the game, which maybe is too broad.
Okay.
So like you could say like a novel, like Keith Baker, Eberron, writes novels set in the Eberron universe. That is definitely an example of the game's fiction. This probably came when I was talking about Dragonlance.
Okay.
This probably, we were talking about Dragonlance because I'm running the campaign and we were talking about the novels. So Dragonlance novels would be fiction for the universe. But I would also say the thing that we've talked about a lot, like the history of the world in the campaign setting, that's also fiction for the game, but fiction of a different type. And then they don't do it as much anymore. But certain RPGs, especially back in the 90s, would always have like a little fiction. Exalted still does this. Every like chapter has a little fiction break. White Wolf used to have little comics, like 2 or 3 page comics that at the beginning of chapters or at the beginning of the book, which were in setting fiction. So I think you would approach those different ways, but I think all of that is fiction about the game. And so for like, I'm going to start with the history one, if that's cool with you, and say my opinion is, if it's good, yes.
Yeah, but is it often good, Jesse?
I would say that it's often kind of like, oh, okay. But when it's not good, you will notice.
Yeah. My issue with this is that, and I am certainly not the exception to this rule, but a lot of people who are into role-playing games are creative and they love stories and they are essentially storytellers. You know, that's what we do at our table. We're dungeon masters or game mothers, and we tell stories at the table, right? And the people who create these games for us, they are also these storytellers. And 9 times out of 10, they've either thought this themselves or they've had people in their lives or both have been like, you know, you're really good. You got a lot of great ideas. You're very creative and we love your stories. You should write fiction. And they're like, yeah, I should do that. I know a lot about writing. And so they do it and they put it into our gaming books. And I feel like I don't have a huge problem with it because I don't want to be a hypocrite. I am not a good fiction writer. I don't have what it takes to write fiction.
But you know how to pick a place.
Yeah.
Like any place.
Yeah, sure. But like, you know, unfortunately, our society has an abusive relationship with art and the people who make it. So it's not like it's easy by any stretch of the imagination. It's nigh impossible to eke out a successful career as a novelist or as a writer. You have to, you know, it is a painful part of life if that's something you decide to do as your profession. There, in my opinion, and my hat goes off to any writer, whether they're doing it for funsies or trying to do it professionally. So let me just state that utmost respect. But I have an issue sometimes with fiction being in my gaming books.
Okay.
Because I think it's unnecessary. You know, am I required to read it? No. But I do enjoy getting some sort of sight into the world. Like, I read Keith Baker's Thorn series, for instance. Well, I didn't read it, I listened to it on Audible. Um, but I specifically sought it out because I wanted to get actual examples of the world and how things worked and what it was like from the direct perspective of the creator of Eberron. And I had listened to him on a podcast talk about his own creation. And they're well enough written that they're worth reading, you know? But I
Yeah.
just feel like that's the exception and not the rule. Does that
Yeah,
make any
not
sense?
the mass market, like, I mean, I don't often turn to the mass market paperbacks. We'll talk about that tier of fiction. I don't often turn to that for more inspiration for my game unless I'm really sort of like desperate or I'm really digging the vibe of this world and I want to
Yeah.
live in it, which is why I'm in the middle of the like 5e Spelljammer tie-in novel. That is, it's fun. I mean, it's like space pirates. Yay. I don't know. It's fun.
Hmm.
It's not great. But it's not actually helping me generate ideas for Spelljammer, which is what I got into it, hoping I could see an example of what this is like.
Right.
I have how actually I read a Talatis, which is the other continent of Dragonlance novel, and
Okay.
was inspired by that whole three-part series actually to like want to run a campaign that kind of mirrored some elements of that. So I mean, some like because it was just a cool idea in an exotic place. So I think it's a mixed bag, but I don't think if you're looking for ideas for your game, going to the specific setting fiction for it is generally a thing I would recommend. I would say avoid that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I just don't understand the appeal because, and I'm not even talking about the quality of the writing because I don't even really think that matters as much. Because I think most fiction in gaming books and supportive novels, I think is, at its worst, it's passable, it's pulpy, you know, I think like Richard Knack is a great example of this. Like he's a writer who has written a ton of like supportive novels for games and stuff like that.
Kaz
And
the Minotaur.
yeah, and I think he's done really good books, and I think he's done some really bad ones too. But I think for the most part, it's subjective. The problem I have with a lot of fiction in the gaming books themselves is it's just pockets of what you know you're
No, see, that's the
describing.
stuff I like.
Okay, explain to me why you like it.
I just like a little 1 or 2 page vignette. But like at the point it starts getting to be like 5, 6, 10 pages of fiction, I'm like, nah, that's too
Yeah.
much. Unless it's just like the one at the beginning. Shadowrun does that, I
Mm-hmm.
think, a lot. They'll have one kind of short story at the very beginning of the book, just as kind of like this is the world as people in it experience it.
Yeah.
Um, like I appreciate that. Like when it's written in line with the game, intended to illustrate specifically the world or the type of situations that can happen. Um,
Right.
I
Yeah.
think it's cool.
I I don't. I don't like the vignettes. I don't like 10 pages. I don't like 2 pages. I don't really like one paragraph. Like I think it doesn't really fit.
But
This
if
is
you're
a
talking about a campaign setting, I mean, at a certain level, like it's all fiction because it's
well,
not
okay, so
real.
maybe the style of fiction then is what I'm
Okay.
getting at. If
You don't want someone else's adventure in that world.
I don't want narrative fiction in the sense of like, you know, um Sliver was stuck in a hole, orcs all around him. His swords, were drawn slowly from their scabbards and he prayed to his god. Like I don't need that in my gaming book. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? If you're doing if you're doing like world description and overview and series of events, like is that what you're considering to also be fiction in that context?
I mean, so you don't like narrative fiction.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of like when I would come visit you I would grab like one of those 40K books off of your shelf that was all about like what the Skaven book. Like I don't know that much about 40K, so bear with me here. But like
That's
there's this
Warhammer Fantasy, but or Age of
okay,
Sigmar.
Warhammer Fantasy, whatever. There's this Skaven book. I was like, what's this? Pulled it off the shelf. And I just start reading it, and I really liked it. I really liked it, like the full descriptions of the Skaven and what's important to them and the different variations of them and how they feel about the moon and the history of these rat
Yeah, the
men.
moon's cheese. So
Yeah.
like,
Like that is, I like that. What I don't like is an characterization of like a Skaven chieftain who's like convinced that his food is poison and that, the elders of the tribe are trying to kill him or something
oh, they
like that.
definitely are for the Skaven though.
Like
Like
I,
he's legitimately he's right about that.
like I'm not interested in that in the moment narrative fiction.
What's interesting is the way that the Games Workshop does that with those books. And you're talking about the rule books, right? Like the army
Yes.
books specifically.
Yes.
What's interesting is like the actual mechanical content of that is usually only about like 18 to 26 pages,
Mm-hmm.
like with the full art spreads in them. So in order to like have an actual book that's not just a magazine or a pamphlet, it's full of that fluff. And I
Mm-hmm.
and I really appreciate, people call it the fluff, I really enjoy the fluff. And when they do the first person narratives, it's like a sidebar that's one column,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just in there to make it feel characterful. Like it's
Right.
not there to tell a story. Its purpose is not to give you a narrative. It's there to illustrate color.
Okay. So why do I have such an aversion to it? Like, do I have an allergic reaction to characterization in a gaming book? Or is it that like I know this isn't going to go anywhere and I don't want to get invested in it?
If I had to guess, and this is based on privileged conversations I've had with you as my best friend of many years, and in things outside gaming, is like if you're going to create in that space, you don't want somebody else's idea tainting your process.
Okay. Okay. I think that's very fair. Yeah. So then what's the difference then between that and you brought up the Dragonlance books, which I absolutely love. I'm after our conversations about it, I'm like, man, I should really pick those back up
I
again.
don't actually know that you should, but enjoy the ride.
I've talked about how much I love the Dark Sun novels.
Yeah.
Um and I just mentioned the Keith Baker books, right? So
Yep.
what is working for me in those that's not working for me in the other example?
I think that's a self-contained narrative, and you're not planning on taking those ideas to build your campaign.
Okay, that makes sense. So what you're saying is like that's kind of isolated in its own thing
Yeah.
and
But when
it
I'm reading the book, I'm reading the rule book to get ideas for what I'm going to do. I don't want your idea. This is just my wild
no,
guess.
I hadn't even considered this. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, you're like, I'm going to get down. I'm going to get some ideas for my process. I don't want somebody else's ideas messing up my process.
I'm blown away by this. I think that this is exactly right because, and I'm shocked that I didn't think of this sooner, but like Eberron specifically, if we're using that as an example, like Keith Baker openly says, like everybody's Eberron is different and it's supposed to be that way. And the way the setting is written and described is supposed to be in a way for your Eberron to be different from his Eberron, essentially. And I knew that going into those novels. And based on what you just said, like I kind of feel like an idiot right now for not realizing this uh, previously, but like that's entirely why I would read and enjoy those books. Like this is Keith Baker's Eberron. I'm not going to put Thorn or the events of those books or those other characters in my Eberron. Like it's
Hmm.
like not at all, and it's not like taking up space in my gaming book and it's not sitting there like sticking out like a sore thumb being like, do I have to read this? Like, does this add to the equation? Or, fuck it, just skip it. Like, I voluntarily wanted to get a glimpse into Keith Baker's Eberron because I knew mine was going to be different no matter what.
Yeah.
Hmm,
I don't know. It's interesting because a while ago we had talked a little bit about writing a gaming book based on a
true.
dream you had, and I
Yeah.
wrote some evocative fiction
Hmm.
to go in that book as like the thing, but it was just there to be evocative. It wasn't
Hmm.
even necessarily like it's a narrative, but it's like it's not about the character. It's just there to setting establish.
Right.
Just there as color. That was my goal with it. So I don't know. I don't know. I want to talk about the other thing about like we tell people a lot as our advice is like don't write the Bible of history.
Yeah.
And I'm reading this book right now, and I'm not going to name names because I think they worked really hard and there's a lot of elements in it, and we haven't officially talked about reviewing it. So I'm not going to name the book,
Okay.
but I'm reading the history. I'm reading the history part that they have in there, and I'm just like, oh, like when it feels like they basically just like are cribbing from a lore of Magic the Gathering, like the entire history of Magic the Gathering in 20 minutes lore video. I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, there's so many things mechanically that are neat that are happening in this book, but this history part, I'm like, dudes, do better.
Uh-huh.
I wish I would have skipped it because none of it helped. Like that history part.
Yeah. That's usually how I feel about the narrative fiction part of it. What is the best way then? Who's doing it right? Right? Like if that's an example of somebody who's doing it wrong, can you think of, maybe you have it on the shelf behind you somewhere, but like can you think of a book that
I
does
don't
it
know.
really,
Do I?
really well? You know?
I think Onyx Path and before them White Wolf does it really well.
Okay.
I think they're real good at inserting short fiction that is evocative of the setting and helps you wrap your head around what Exalted is. Or what vampire is or werewolf is. I liked the
Hmm.
comics that they had, the little 2-page comic spreads.
Yeah.
I understand that those are probably very expensive to make, and so I stopped doing them. But like, I get it. Like the story in the beginning of that one right there, the Exalted Third Edition. Um, I just think it's a really cool story that sets up like, here's what the world's like
Hmm.
in a way that reading the description of the world cannot do. But that
Gotcha.
character is never mentioned again in the book. It's not telling a full story of that character. It's just like, this is a thing that happened. It's crazy. Here's the world and what it looks like living and breathing. Okay. It does kind of the same thing as an example of play does
Hmm.
with the mechanics.
Gotcha.
So I think
Okay.
I'd say Onyx Path does it pretty well.
Gotcha. Now maybe I'll check that out then if that's an example of it done well. Because I'm sure there's going to be exceptions to the rule, right? So, setting fiction, not a problem, generally speaking, for me. But I would really like to see both examples done very well.
Yeah.
Narrative and setting or fluff, as you called it. I would have called it setting fiction, but I think fluff is a very accurate term for it. So,
I really would probably restrict myself to using fluff for like Warhammer and war games
okay. Why is that?
because it's the extra stuff like that you don't
Mm,
actually need to play to paint your army and move miniatures around the table. You don't need to have, the
you don't
story
need to get
about.
invested in the rich tapestry that is the setting of the
Oh, I
miniatures
think
war
you
game.
definitely you're going to have more fun if you do, but you're also going to spend way more money because then you're going to like have an emotional connection to these different armies. Like,
I mean, look, that my only experience with Warhammer Games Workshop products from the point of view of the people that play the miniatures games is like they are way into this setting. And, based on what you just said, like that, I mean, I can't conceive of another of somebody being into the hobby, but not also being into the setting because I don't have any examples of it.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know?
I've played other mini games, and the thing that I think has usually made me bounce is at the end of the day, like I don't just care about the setting. Like when uh War Machine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whose RPG I like I didn't care about the setting for the miniatures game, even though I knew about it from playing the RPG. Like it just didn't inspire me. Malifaux, I don't. I read a book. I bought like two little armies, painted them, read their army books, and was like, I don't know. There's just something about Warhammer.
Yeah.
Probably sunk cost fallacy, to be honest. I have read like every Horus Heresy novel, which is like 65 books or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
They do a lot of content. They put
Well,
out a
what's
lot of
amazing too about those 65 books is I would say that probably like 89% of them are good. Like Warhammer novels, like if you're just coming at it like this is pulpy fiction to help sell a game line of plastic toys, you will be surprised at how consistently good the writing is.
That's awesome.
A lot of it's hyperbole, but it's like they know they're taking it to such a ridiculous extreme that you're just like like when they're finishing off what with the series of the Horus Heresy with the End and the Death book 1 through 5, and you're
Hmm.
just there for it, like
I don't ever see myself getting into tabletop miniatures. I'm not going to say never because we all know what happens with me and absolutes is I will eventually retract and go back on what I said and then do the thing I said would never happen. And only Sith deal in absolutes, Jesse. But
true.
I don't see myself really ever getting into tabletop miniature gaming. I would love to get a recommendation on like the best book in the Warhammer setting, knowing full well I'm not going to play the game. I think that this would be an interesting experience. Now, granted, I've got some other books in the queue that I need to get through first. You
Yeah,
know, I'm
yeah.
going through one by Emily Oster at the moment. So, like, once we're done with those, then I've got room to slot in another book. But, like, um, I would be curious. Like, what do you think is like, it doesn't have to be the best, actually. Let's say like a quintessential must read Warhammer um novel for
I
me.
I would say it's two, and it's Army that I don't play, but I just think they're so great at explain. Oh, yeah, the Eisenhorn trilogy by Dan Abnett.
Okay. Wait a minute. Dan Abnett from Abnett and Lanning from the comics from the Guardians of the
Yes,
Galaxy? Oh, perfect. What did you
yes,
call this? The Eisenhower trilogy?
the Eisenhorn trilogy.
Perfect.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, I'm gonna do this, so I'm gonna get judged by all the 40K people. I'm like, oh yeah, no, we all universally pretty much agree that the Eisenhorn trilogy is the best place to start with Warhammer 40K fiction.
Oh, that's easy. I've loved Abnett and Lanning stuff from Marvel Comics and their stuff with the Wildstorm with Majestic. Fucking chef's kiss.
Yeah, Dan Abnett, that's the author. And there's an omnibus on Amazon. So yeah, there you go.
All right.
An omnibus edition of all three. If you like that, I would then say the now the I'm biased. The
Mm-hmm.
Night Lords trilogy.
Okay.
Uh
Writing it down.
yeah, the Night Lords trilogy, which is by Aaron Dembinski Bowden,
Okay.
is a POV novel from the Chaos Space Marines.
Okay.
And then I would also I don't have a particular favorite, maybe the first one, but Gaunt's Ghosts,
Okay.
and then also any of the Caiaphas Cain books.
Perfect. Look at all these recommendations.
I know. And after you read some of those, then I can be like, and now let's play Imperium Maledictum, the
No
40K
idea what
role
that
playing
means.
game.
Oh, I'm into role playing games. Yeah.
Yeah. enough that you do a podcast about them
I'd consider doing a podcast about them,
if the
but what would
co-host
we
was
call
right.
it?
I don't know. Maybe an inside joke that nobody has any idea what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. And then we'll have to accidentally spill that inside joke in the first episode, causing Maddie to do some creative editing to remove it because we'd rather keep the mystery.
Yeah. Maybe is this the episode where we reveal it? It's not. No,
No,
sorry.
no. Jesse, what do we got coming up in season 5 when we're done with bonus episodes, though?
Oh, holy fucking shit. It's a dinosaur. Season 5 is beginning our new season structure where we are going to pick a theme for each season and then do a series of episodes about that theme. And because we are masochists, we picked dinosaurs. We like really just got into this joke we kept making and like daring each other, like, hey, you want to just make it about dinosaurs? So if you've I guess I'm probably going to find myself reading like Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, the role playing game, because I know
Holy
it
shit.
exists, or Primeval, the role playing game. Did you ever watch Primeval? BBC show
No.
about a
It
bunch of
sounds familiar, but I've never,
I
no.
actually kind of really liked the first series because it's a BBC show, so I'll say
Mm-hmm.
series instead of
Mm-hmm.
season. But it had that same problem of every BBC show you kind of like. The actor decided the show was popular enough that he could make it in Hollywood. He
Yes.
left the show and then disappeared from all awareness.
Right. The career killer for British actors.
Did you ever watch like the Westwood remake?
No, no, I haven't.
That's pretty good. There's a whole scene where they're going to like the storage things where they have all the like replicants like on ice that are just no longer used in the park anymore. And it's just like a bunch of figures with plastic, like human, very clearly looking human.
Oh,
And then someone's
Westworld.
walking through it and it's very eerily like, are they gonna wake up? I'm convinced there's a warehouse somewhere in Los Angeles that just has all these British actors that thought they were gonna make it in Hollywood, just like under that plastic and
I thought you said Westwood.
no, Westworld.
Yes, Westworld I've seen.
Okay.
Yes. I could do a whole bonus episode on Westworld. And I didn't even finish the 4th season.
I didn't either. Why not? I liked it. I'll have to go talk to the wife. Be like, we gotta finish Westworld.
Listener, if you would like to participate in season 5 dinosaurs, you can write us at jauntymantisgmail.com. And the question should be role-playing game oriented. Now, I don't know what kind of role-playing game dinosaur questions you would have, but surprise me, you know?
I mean, if we only get one and it's like, what's better for a talental halfling, a fastieth or a pteranodon as a mount? I'm like, well, God, we're gonna have to talk about that for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Thanks for writing it in.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Give us that challenge. Oh, dear listener, I know there's enough of you out there. I've seen the analytics for this podcast. Jesse, we are above 600 active monthly subscribers to the Jaunty Mantis.
Heck yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, everybody. I can't believe we made it this far. I thought we would really only have 3, and one of them would be my mom, but we actually have significantly more than 3.
That's awesome. Well, people who are out there listening, I hope you like it and enjoy it, or we at least make you mad in a way that provides you with dopamine.
Yeah.
The whole purpose of everything on the internet these days, make you mad in a way that provides dopamine.
Ugh. Oh, starting to get nauseous.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Legit. Speaking of nauseous, did Sci-Fi Mark send a picture to a group chat? It was a mod for Baldur's Gate 3. Did I send this to you?
No.
Withers
Baldur's
Big
Gate 3, you
Naturals.
say? I'm
Yeah.
listening.
The mod is Withers Big Naturals.
I love the modding community.
Yeah, while we're talking about how the internet's a mistake, I'll send that over after that we get off the mics.
Please do. I love all things Withers. I try to get Withers as soon as possible in every single one of my Baldur's Gate runs.
Yes. All right, then. Mantis fans, get out there and write some really just mid setting fiction to put into your fantasy heartbreaker, or don't.
Yeah, I complained a lot about fiction, but you know what? Express your creativity. Don't let someone like me yuck your yum. I'm just an asshole on the internet like everybody else. Don't take it seriously. If you love writing, if you want to try your hand at storytelling and doing it through fiction, fucking do it. Explore your creativity. Be a person. Live life.
That's some good advice.
And until next time, keep playing those fucking role-playing games.